DJ Khaled. Stefan Sagmeister has designed for clients as diverse as the Rolling Stones, HBO, and the Guggenheim Museum. He's a 2-time Grammy winner and also earned practically every important international design award. Stefan frequently speaks on the TED stage about how the big subjects of our lives, like happiness or beauty, and how they connect to design, and what that actually means to our everyday lives. His books sell in the hundreds of thousands, and his exhibitions have been mounted in museums around the world. His exhibit, The Happy Show, attracted over 500,000 visitors worldwide and became the most visited graphic design show in history. A few years ago, I was asked to introduce Stefan to the stage in Switzerland, as a matter of fact. And I thought about it for a moment, how to introduce Stefan Sagmeister, because he and I have been pals for, practically 30 years. So what I did is I got up on stage and I said, ladies and gentlemen, if you could do me a favor and help introduce Stefan Sagmeister. And I basically got them all to do the the clapping and stomping from the Queen song, right? And while they were doing that, I said, ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, dames und Herren, je présente Stefan Sagmeister. Because I felt a talent as big as his needed a proper introduction. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Stefan Sagmeister. But I'd like to start with what I love to ask everybody, which is, Stefan, what made you weird as a kid?
Well, I was very tall. I basically got to be pretty much my height, which is 6'4" or 6'5", when I was, I think, 13. So in every class picture, there was like this one guy in the back row on the left-hand side, who just was a head taller than everybody else. And of course, I think like most kids, I would have loved to be the same height as everybody else. I think that you just don't want to really stick out. I think by the time I was 18, 19, I didn't really mind anymore. Also, I was going to a lot of live concerts where, of course, that turned out to be a real advantage.
Yeah. Correct me. I remember once years ago, you told me the story of I think of you getting caught writing graffiti because it was so high up.
That is absolutely true. That is absolutely true. And it was. It's also strange how that changes. We actually wrote the graffiti on the house of like the festival house kind of thing, that protesting how much money was being spent for elite culture when there was nothing left for youth culture. Mm-hmm. And of course the local cops, considering I also had put posters with my name on it that had A's in the circle, that was also like for anarchy, that was also sprayed by other people. I don't think that we sprayed A's in a circle, but that's how they got, onto the idea that it could be me, and because it was sprayed so high up because I was so stupid. They were rather convinced it was me. I, of course, said it was not me, and I don't think that they had a witness. So that was that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I can go back very quickly to that spraying incident, it's also, for me, it's always super interesting how my opinion on things also changes. Now I'm very happily going to that exact cultural center that we protested against as a 15, 16-year-old. And we just participated in an art fair that was in there. I happily watch concerts and opera in this thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just it's always super mind-boggling to me that I could have been so convinced at one time that this is the right thing and have a totally different opinion on it. I mean, at the same time, we also went onto the street, made demonstrations for Daniel Noriega in Nicaragua, which now turned out to be pretty much in the running for the worst government in all of South America. I think between Venezuela and Nicaragua, those truly are the two countries that are the poorest, where the people are in the world do the least well.
Mm-hmm.
And as a 16, 15-year-old, I thought that this was the shit, that this was where, how countries should be run. In any case, let's go to your question. Sorry.
No, it's quite all right. Based on the work you were doing early on, can I use the term vis-a-vis you as a child? I imagine you as a kid interested in science and magic. Because I see there are motifs that you used early on that have this kind of like playfulness about and curiosity about science and magic.
I think that came a little later. Like as a real child, I neither was particularly interested in science nor in magic. I think at one time I had a magic kit, but it was not something that was super, super close to my heart.
Mm-hmm.
I think that literally all came later. I wound up very, very young doing the layout for a magazine, left-wingy magazine, and that was the time of the spraying. I did posters for that magazines, both some a little political, some also just music festival, things like that. And then I think while I studied, and it became clear that engaging the viewer would be a big deal, I became much more interested in science. And then I think I saw some sort of like magic tricks that could be involved in design, that you could kind of use to again involve the viewer. And then ultimately, when for my graduation thesis, at Pratt, this was, I went to grad school at Pratt because I had gotten a scholarship, and it was, a possibility to elongate another 2 years of basically doing whatever I wanted.
Yeah.
And for my graduation thesis at Pratt, I did a written thesis, very properly researched. I think it was 400 pages, and it was called, the title I kind of forgot, but something like Incredible, Surprising Magic Gimmicks in Graphic Design. And I literally looked at every single thing that wasn't really straightforward four-color printing, anything from scratch and sniff to, things like moving devices, like things that animated without needing a camera, 3D stuff that grew like planty things, like basically everything that has been used historically in this direction. And stuff that I thought could be used in that direction.
I see.
So, and that, of course, having researched that properly and having been quite relentless in interviewing designers who had done stuff in this direction, then I think it was quite influential for when, later on I opened the studio and some of these things just were waiting to be used.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Early on, before coming to the States, or even as a kid, was your creativity nurtured, like by family or school?
Not particularly. I mean, we had, of course, drawing classes, or art classes in school. But as a child, I wasn't particularly good or particularly interested.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a classmate who was. Like, I had a classmate who could draw a spaceship from memory that looked so good that classmates would give him their lunch in exchange for one of those drawings, which was this was, very, very valid forms of payments.
Yeah.
So the drawings must have been really, really good. This was not me. And I actually was not a particularly good drawer. I'm now an okay drawer because the university the university that I wanted to attend in Vienna had a conservative professor, and he wouldn't take anybody without real drawing skills. So for a year before that university, I did nature studies, hands, chairs, plants, but portraits, and it turned out that you can learn it. Meaning, I probably would never be a fantastic drawer, but you can definitely become a decent drawer by doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you can get good at practice. You can practice and get good at anything.
Yeah.
Are there what are the best or most interesting lessons you've learned from your parents?
I think my parents were ultimately very passionate about what they did, specifically my mom, which was, in her case, having a store.
Mm-hmm.
Like, my parents had the big store in the tiny town. And she was a salesperson through and through. And I think that passion made the store successful. And it gave her a real, I don't know, line to live that she followed. It also came in the small town with quite some status because she was Frau Sagmeister, and considering that pretty much if you needed clothing, you went to that store. So pretty much the whole small town, this is 25,000 people, knew her, or half of them. Which, to me as a kid was a pain in the ass because you couldn't walk through town with my mom without being stopped every 10 meters to say hello and chat a little bit with this person and that person. I think that they had about 10 employees in that store. And I think they treated them well, not because that was good for business, but I think because this is how you live the life. And in addition, they never really became friends with them.
Mm.
So they literally, basically, this was very much a respectful professional relationship. And I think without really being conscious of it, behave in my studio very similar. Like, I became very good friends with many of people who had worked with us once they stopped working with us.
Ah.
And then we went out drinking and, sometimes now, I mean, even have holidays together.
Mm-hmm.
But while we worked together, it was quite a professional relationship. So I
Interesting.
think that's sort of like the first thing that would come to my mind.
Okay. Well, it's funny because you yourself are what I think of as a very personable, um, uh, very generous with your time. I've seen you in crowds, and I've seen you, when fans come up, and you are very generous and a very open person. So I think there's a
I
big
think so.
influence of your mom. Yeah. Do you consider yourself spiritual?
No, no, not particularly. I mean, I'm not religious. I love religious architecture. So I'm in churches all the time, but I'm there for the architecture, the beauty, the form, the time and effort and love spent on building these things.
Mm-hmm.
This is true for Buddhist temples or Jewish temples, or meaning, or for Japanese temples. So, but yeah, I love the form, and I don't really consider myself particularly spiritual.
Okay. It's funny because I have not asked anyone else that question, but it came up to me with you for some reason.
Oh, it was interesting. Let's say in Bali, of course, you are around a lot of Buddhists, and I remember a guy who was very deep into Buddhism, and he somehow found the book like Things I've Learned in My Life So Far. And he was convinced that this was deeply Buddhist.
Ah.
And I have to say, I was sort of flattered by that because I came up with these things without knowing pretty much anything at the time about Buddhism. Uh, but I definitely took it more as a compliment or so. But I
Mhm.
myself would, yeah, meaning I think, of course, you are influenced by various religious directions on how to live, meaning, even from the Ten Commandments, most of them are absolutely fine in this is how you should live.
Yeah.
And obviously, he thought that many of the things that I had come up by myself of what I've learned, I could have also found in Buddhism.
Hmm.
And I, of course, found that to be super true for almost anything that the big directions, be it stories or rules to live by, have been pretty much set for ages. And it really, what we can do is somehow find a new version of this, or a version that works for us. Meaning, in the things I've learned, like, I had a thing at one line that says, everything I do always comes back to me. And I had written that down in my diary because I found it to be true.
Yeah.
But a year or two later, I discovered that what goes around comes around is pretty much exactly the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Or karma. Yeah. Karma's a bitch. Yeah.
Exactly. So they're all pretty much say the same thing, but what goes around comes around. I had heard so often that it became meaningless to me. And simply expressing that very same thing differently became meaningful. And of course, now that I've seen hundreds of reprints of that thing that we had done, and it was published in magazines and all of those things, it lost its meaning again for me. Or another example, I actually, when I was in Indonesia, I had reminders of many of those maxims carved out of teak wood, and I have a whole ceiling in my bedroom that's gorgeous and beautiful, that basically has some of those things carved into the ceiling. with the expectation that I would lie in bed, look up the ceiling, and would be reminded of some of these things.
Mm-hmm.
But they have been so much part of my life, and I know them so well that the ceiling really makes no difference.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so, like I said earlier, thank you for taking the time, because I know you're on sabbatical, one of your years off. And that's one of the things I'd like to just touch on a little bit. The idea of regeneration, taking the time to figure out what you know. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, meaning I took the first sabbatical 7 years after opening the studio, out of a reason because I felt that the work was getting repetitive. Both from a process point of view, we were doing album covers at the time, and realizing that album cover number 42 just wasn't as much fun as the first one. I wasn't that engaged. And I felt if I'm getting less and less engaged, the whole thing will kind of go down the drain. It will be like, I'll enter a vicious circle.
Yeah.
So I felt I needed to do something to stop this. And the best thing I could come up with was doing a sabbatical. And that first one was very scary, because I thought we'll be forgotten. It will look unprofessional, because I just started a design studio that actually I was able to put it there where it was successful. Like, we did the kind of things that I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
We started out, the idea was to do design for the music industry. In those first 7 years, we did work for the Stones and the Talking Heads and Lou Reed, like for people that I really loved. So it had worked, and now to go a year close the studio was scary. And it probably was the biggest hurdle I had to jump over that I remember.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt the alternative of just going on without a change seemed not delightful. And so I did it, and I enjoyed the year very, very much. It was a great year. In that first year, I almost did nothing but sort of ideas explorations. I did not produce a single thing, really. And I was, at the end of the year, quite happy to reopen the studio, to go back into really producing things where you would see what you've done. And looking back on it, I mean, specifically now that I'm in my fourth sabbatical and I have 3 completed sabbaticals, they were crazy successful. And by successful, I mean, if I look at all the work that we produced in the last 30 odd years, the majority of the pieces that I really think were worthwhile doing, that I find it was good that we did them, came out of thinking of the sabbaticals.
Mm-hmm.
And which means really that if I wouldn't have had the guts at the time to do the sabbatical, most of the pieces that I now love would have never seen the light of day.
Yeah.
Meaning it's possible because, as you know, if you're in the day-to-day of a design studio, and there's deadlines and there is things and there's problems with this and problems with that, it's very difficult to really step back and look at the big picture. So it's possible, I'm not sure, it's possible that we would still be doing CD covers and would be wondering why business would be so bad if I would have never done the sabbaticals. I'm not quite sure. I probably would have changed. But in any case, so there is that. There is a second big deal that came out of the sabbatical, which is that because I had a whole year to think about stuff, a lot of the stuff that I thought I would love to be doing, if I would only have the time, turned out I didn't want to do at all. It was just an assumption in my brain. An example would be during the busy studio times, I thought that I would love to read much more, but didn't have the time.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't read a single book more in my sabbaticals than I did in busy studio times. Like I'm now on sabbatical. I'm more than halfway through, and I've probably read 4 or 5 books, which is
Mm-hmm.
pretty much on par with what I do when the studio is super busy. And probably most important is that if I look at my students, I taught until last year at the graduate program at SVA. Many of them, when they come, see design as a calling, like they're really into it. And when I meet them 4 or 5 years later at a conference or on the street, and I talk to them, I feel that many of them now see this world, see this as a job.
Mm.
The kind of thing that you look forward to the weekend on Wednesday. And I think that the sabbaticals were by far the best strategy that I know to keep this whole thing as a calling.
Yeah.
And not deteriorating into a career, where you constantly have to ask yourself, is all this hard work really worth it? Or worse, when it's a job. And, I remember a friend of mine who works for a very famous New York fashion design company. And they have the whole building. And she told me that basically on Wednesday, the conversations in the elevator are, well, only 2 more days.
Yeah.
So that's not a way to live.
Yeah.
I mean, I know if you have a choice, meaning obviously there's a lot of people who don't really have a choice. But I think that if you're on a level where you studied design and you're a grown-up, I think there is some agency within you that you can say, I want to do this or I want to do that. And, and it's scary. I totally see that. This is the first sabbatical where my partner also goes on sabbatical, and it's her first. And she's now, because we are 7-8 months in, quite settled, and the work that she's doing on sabbatical is fantastic.
Excellent.
But it was scary. I mean, she definitely had to go. She had to jump a big hurdle.
Yeah.
And I think, one last thing is I did a talk about sabbaticals on TED. And, TED.com is super, super popular, so it has millions of views. So sometimes people at a conference come up to me and say, I saw your talk, and I followed it, and I did a sabbatical too, which of course makes me ask them, so how was it? And James, there was not a single person who didn't have glossy eyes when they responded.
Oh, super, super. Yeah. No, I think there's nothing worse, especially in the creative field, to ask somebody, how's work, and they go, it's work. And I'm like, oh my God, you fucking lose. You lose. If you can't figure that out, if you can't understand that is a choice, and so bravo. I want to go back a little bit to the early work, which is music. Why music? I mean, I understand when I was a kid, I used to draw album covers. I'd redraw Kiss and Elton John and, Pink Floyd. Why music?
I mean, that's a very easy answer. I think that, not that I was aware of at the time, but specifically now looking back, I think out of all of the arts, music is the most emotional. I don't think that there is another art form that can change my mood in such a direct way just by consuming it.
Mm-hmm.
And this, I was a terrible musician. I was in a prog rock band that was not very good. We composed far too difficult music for our abilities to play it. But being connected to it, or I would say following those two passions, art and music. And at the time, I opened the studio when I was just about 30. My music was still very central to my life. It's less central now, but was very central then. Uh, Seemed like a no-brainer combining those two.
Yeah.
And of course, I think I definitely expected that it would be more fun to meet David Byrne or Mick Jagger than it would be to sit in meetings with marketing managers.
Mm-hmm.
It is, I think at the time, that turned out to be not true, but at the time I thought it would be true. It was kind of the only packaging that wouldn't be thrown away, that it really lived in people's living rooms. I think that is true for vinyl now again, but it definitely wasn't true for CD covers, where people, including myself, disposed of entire collections because they weren't really necessary anymore. I love the fact that you weren't talking to other designers, but to a very big mass audience. We did an album for Jay-Z where the first print run was 5 million copies. So it was really mass, but you could still at the same time go, I think out of many of the, let's say, commercial graphic design endeavors.
Right now, you're thinking, oh man, I wish James Victori could be my mentor, my guru. Hell, I wish he was my coach. Well, you can make that happen. Go to yourworkisagift.com. There's a questionnaire that will probably help you out, but it'll also give you access to a free call. So let's talk. Let's free you from overwhelm and creative frustration. Let's build your business and help you get paid to do what you love. Again, go to yourworkisagift.com. Let's talk.
Music was definitely on the more artistic side, design for music, or if it's I think there's a fantastic saying by Adorno, the philosopher who I normally am not in the habit of quoting, but he basically says that there is nothing that is completely 100% functional, and there is nothing that is completely 100% non-functional. Because even the most non-functional things, even if it was designed to be completely non-functional, has some function in it. Let's say, even if Donald Judd says he wants his pieces to not function at all, I can stand in front of it, make a selfie, and give it some function. While, let's say, even the most functional thing, like a cog, is somehow informed by issues of transparency or that might come from the non-functional world. So the whole thing is basically just on a level where you have non-function here and function here. And so if you look at it from a design perspective, okay, like a text form is very close maybe to pure function, while an album cover is much closer to non-function. And we as an audience, I think we love we celebrate non-functional things more. Like, we celebrate the designer, the architect of a cathedral or a museum that doesn't have a lot of function, much more than the designer of a factory, which has many, many more functions.
Mm.
And we celebrate, let's say, in the tiny world of graphic design, the designer of the album cover more than the designer of the text form, even though that's very debatable which of these two designs are actually more helpful to the public at large.
Yeah.
But it would probably be difficult to be a known designer within the graphics industry as a designer of text forms, while my studio got quite well known doing album covers.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Back when I was in New York and hanging out with my New York designer pals, I used to always enjoy asking, especially when we were in a group, asking, the table, do you consider yourselves artists? And I was amazed at the amount of resistance to admit to that. No, I'm a designer. Stefan, are you an artist?
I'm not. So I'm on that New York table.
I know you are.
And here is my reasoning. I would say that as a viewer, I don't give a shit. As a viewer, it does not matter to me at all if a piece has been designed by an artist or a designer. As a viewer, it matters. Does it touch me? Is it good? Is it innovative? Is it something that's close to my heart? Can I relate to it?
Mm-hmm.
As a doer, as a designer, or as a person who makes things, I'm of course asked about this all the time. And there I would say I simply follow the terminology that has been part of my life, which means that I went to design school. I ran a design studio all my life. Even now that we really don't have clients, in the last 6 years, we didn't really have any client whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's, we do most of my time really is spent creating exhibitions. And those exhibitions often take place in museums that are clearly art museums.
Mm-hmm.
But I still say it's design simply because I wanted to have a function. And meaning, I think my favorite quick definition between the two is one from Donald Judd that says design has to work, art does not, which really is a difference of functionality.
Yeah.
And when you really go into the detail, that doesn't really work anymore because, if we take the example of Andy Warhol, he started out as a commercial illustrator, won many commercial illustrator trophies,
Mm-hmm.
changed into being a designer later in his life. And sorry, we have a little bit of noise in the back, but I think we'll be fine.
It's okay.
And while he was working as an artist, did many of his portraits to finance his graphic design project, Interview magazine.
Mm-hmm.
While he was being an artist, he did arguably much better work as a graphic designer for albums covers for the Stones and Velvet Underground.
Yeah.
Meaning the Velvet Underground banana cover is demonstrably a better piece of work than the portrait he did of some wife for a German industrialist that he literally only did to make some money and he admitted that's what he did it. That's what he did, make some money to finance Interview. So it becomes some of his functional work is clearly better than some of his non-functional work.
Mm-hmm.
But in general, I think that Donald Judd's thing is standing, and therefore I'd say, even though almost all of the work that we're doing now doesn't really have clients, I still want it to function. If I have artist friends of their exhibitions and don't get anything, they really don't care. This would be a disaster for me. If people come out of the exhibitions that we do and they say, I haven't understood anything, and it didn't touch me, and it didn't move me, and it didn't change my mind on everything, I think I would say that I failed, that the functionality part of this exhibition did not work. And there is a functionality part.
Is your intention still to touch someone's heart with your work?
Yeah, absolutely. Meaning, I think that the shortest way I could explain it would be that I think a piece of good design has to help somebody and it has to delight somebody. If it's just helping, if it's only function, it might as well be a piece of engineering. I mean, a functional doorknob helps somebody opening the door, and it's perfectly fine as that. But an engineer can create that doorknob.
Mm-hmm.
A designer hopefully creates that doorknob in a way that it is beautiful, that it's a delightful piece. And so I think that's really what makes it into a piece of design.
Mm-hmm.
So all those that I sometimes hear at conferences who say, oh, I'm not really about making things pretty. I'm not about aesthetics. I'm a problem solver. I think if they really look into their heart, might have to agree, if they have self-awareness, that there is a big portion of laziness in that statement.
Mm-hmm.
That the problems that we usually need to solve are so unbelievably easy that if you just think you're a problem solver, you're really lazy, because solving most of the problems that we need to solve, is almost nothing. Like, if you design a chair and all it needs to do is to be comfortable, well, I can do 50 of those in an afternoon. But if it needs to be beautiful and relevant in 2025, it's one of the hardest design problems there is. Fighting against 5,000 years of human chair history. And you'll need to come up with something that is better than what has been produced in the last, 5,000 years. And that's unbelievably difficult, because there's been a number of geniuses throughout the ages.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I often think of the Buckminster Fuller quote where he says, I never think about beauty when I'm working on the project, but at the end of the project, if it's not beautiful, I've done something wrong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You, yes.
That beauty is basically built into his working process.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of designers bitch and moan about convincing clients, that process of getting them to see your idea, getting you're getting your way through, seeing your work, envisioning your work, the way you want. What's it like when you're working with Lou Reed, the Rolling Stones, David Byrne, whomever? Is that process the same?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways it's similar. I mean, obviously, there are some differences. One of the difficult things working in the music industry was that in some cases, there was always a danger that you had three clients, meaning the band, the management of the band, and the record company.
Sure.
which inherently have slightly different goals, and that can become quite difficult. But of course, you have to present it. And I think that maybe the best thing that I've learned at Pratt was from a headhunter that came in. And she said, stop, think when you're presenting something to a she talked about it was in a job interview.
Mm-hmm.
She said, stop thinking about it from your point of view. Think about it from their point of view. Think about what their needs are, how you can help them, how you think about what it is, if you would be in their shoes, that would make you want to be part of their team. And I really, somehow she said it that I could really hear it and also apply it to clients.
Mm-hmm.
So when we did client presentations, no matter if it was for Lou Reed or if it was for, a commercial company, we really talk to them what it is they need to achieve. Not about how they want to achieve it, but what is it, like, if in Lou Reed's case, why are you doing a new album? What's the story behind the album? What is it that you want to say in the album? Where do the songs come from? In what state of mind were you when you wrote them? We didn't talk about the cover itself. Or if it was a commercial company, what is it that you wanna what do you wanna achieve? Do you wanna, I don't know, sell more of this, or change the whatever? What is it that you want to achieve? And then it was our job to really do the things that would achieve this. If it was an unethical thing, that achievement, we said no. We grew very, very slowly. So we were in the fantastic position to pick and choose from our favorite clients, because we didn't grow as fast. We didn't grow with the jobs that were offered to us. We
Mm-hmm.
grew much, much, much slower.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that, of course, put us into the fantastic position that we didn't have to lie, because we chose the kind of jobs that we felt were worthwhile, for products that were worthwhile doing, or tell the truth, which was great, because if you can tell the truth, you can be so much more convincing
Mm-hmm.
than when you're lying.
Yes.
Just like in real life. So it's
just like in real life. You are someone I would consider even though you limited the number of jobs that you did in a year, you had a cap on them. You wanted to be working on one thing at a time. Still prolific and still somewhat fantastical. In that one specific thing that always stuck out in my mind was getting people to anally retentively separate colored shades of pennies in a plaza and make exquisite typography out of it. Even with work like that, considering these things and the boldness and the audacity, do you have doubt?
Sure. Yes. I mean, there is stuff that, right now I'm working on newish things. It's the first sabbatical where I continue on the theme. So I'm still working on this idea that long-term thinking creates a totally different worldview than the short term.
Mm-hmm.
Like most media in the short term that's one reason why it's so negative, because scandals and catastrophes happen so quickly and they work brilliantly in the short term. So I'm still working on the long-term thinking, but trying out very different somewhat different directions, like installations or sculptures. And when doing them, yes, there is doubt. I have a fantastic sounding board for it. Like my partner and I have very, very much the same kind of view when it comes to other people's work. So if we go to a museum, no matter if it's design or art, and one of us says, so which is your favorite piece here? We almost always have either the same or very close to the same piece in our mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's say if I have doubts about a direction or a thing, I can easily run it by her because I know that we are on very much on the similar level and I trust her taste. And I think that that was something that was also the case to a large extent with Jessica.
Mm-hmm.
That, you know, in the years when I think Jessica and I were partners for 8 years at Sagmeister and Walsh, I think that worked very brilliantly there. And even before that, with, you know, people that worked with me like Matthias or Hjalti or many of the other people that then went on and started their own studios and became very well-known designers in their own right.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Do you think graphic design has a civic or a moral responsibility?
I mean, I don't think necessarily more than other professions. I think that we all, as people, have a civic or moral responsibility, how we behave to everybody. But you have that responsibility if you are a garbage man or a I don't know, the governor of a state. I think that in general, we all have that as people being alive.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if designers have that more so than others. I also believe that it serves us well because I think most people figured out that if they are kind to other people, there is some sort of reflection going on, and your own life is just more pleasant to live. So, yeah, I think that there is, it also works. And, you know, I sadly can't claim to be kind all the time. I have a fantastic role model in my sister. I have 3 sisters, and there is one in particular who is particularly kind.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to model my life here and there after her, but I'm way not as good at it as she is.
Last question, Stefan. What is a beautiful future?
I mean, I think doing more of what I'm doing. Like, I think right now, my life, both my designy and the private one, and of course they're intertwined, I think is on the right track. You know, meaning obviously right now it's very pleasant because I'm in Guadalajara, Mexico, which is a fantastic place to be. You know, it's big, it's cheap enough that all the urban crafts are still here. Right after our talk here, I have a guy come over and we talk about casting bronze for part of a statue that I'm working on. So it's just like that sort of newness, I've never done anything in bronze. So that sort of newness is exciting. It's also the fact that Guadalajara is not your typical touristy city. So there is not, and Mexico City right now is super, super hot. I mean, half of Williamsburg, Brooklyn moved to Mexico City. If you go into Roma or Condesa, part that are parts of Mexico City, you'll see, guys with man buns and MacBook Pros pretty much filling up the cafes and restaurants.
As my old neighborhood.
Exactly. That is not the case in Guadalajara, which makes us being foreigners here that stay for the long term kind of special, which leads to the fact that we have an easy time being invited to studios or have conversations with artists, designers here that are super interesting. There's also, because it's not so expensive, a lot of the great Mexican artists have very large studios here. And I can show you quickly around my working environments. Look, it's damn
lovely.
sweet surrounding here. It's lovely. And at the same time, I know that coming October, I'll be excited to be back in New York, back into a more regular routine, back to see, Guadalajara is fantastic for working. It's not bad for seeing out, but of course, not comparable at all of what is possible in New York. So I think that's going to be exciting again, too. And I think that if I can, I tell you something else. I had lunch with Milton Glaser at one point years ago, with the late and the great Milton Glaser. And I asked him what he thinks is his best piece of design, expecting, of course, he's going to say the I Heart New York logo, simply because that's the most famous. And he said his most successful piece of design is that he could configure his life into such a way that he's still super interested in design right now.
Yeah.
And I think he was in his 80s when he said that. And he also said that many of his colleagues kind of became either cynical or disinterested or kind of fell out of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm not sure if I completely got it when he told me, but I'm definitely getting it now.
Yeah. Yeah. I experience, it's funny because I experienced the other side with some of his colleagues who were friends of mine who said, it's all been done before. And I thought, oh, that doesn't sound right. I don't want to be that. So that you are living a beautiful future then, Stefan.
Well, let's see. But I think that in general, I know in positive psychology, the best way to figure out this is scientific, the single best way to figure out how good your life is going to be in the future is to see how it was in the past. And so if that rule turns out to be true, I'm fine.
Cool. And hey, by the way, having an artist come over in a little bit to talk about casting a bronze statue, that sounds like the work an artist would do. I don't know.
Yeah, meaning it's and it's going to be, we are doing it, and it's going to be shown in a museum that is an art museum.
Yeah.
Not a design museum.
Yeah.
But that bronze that we're doing is at the same time, when you read the little label, also a piece of data visualization. And it will show you how, I think the piece will be called, and I shouldn't really talk about pieces that are not finished, but I think it's pretty sure. I mean, we're on the way to finishing it. The piece will be called "You're an Atheist" in brackets to most religions, and it basically just shows, the whole statue is, part of it is a historical statue, so part of it is an 18th century statue, and then other parts are new bronze in different parts, and it basically shows what percentage Christianity, Buddhism, Muslims, Jews. It's so tiny that we have to put that it's almost not doable in bronze. But in any way, so
Excellent.
it will be that piece of data visualization, and I would like, and it has a purpose. So I would. So in some ways, it's still a piece of design. And of course, like always, I have an ulterior motive to call myself a designer because, and this is probably the last thing, the history of graphic design is filled with people who were really, really good designers. And in their 50s, kind of got pissed at their clients and said, fuck this shit, I want to become an artist. And then did terrible art. And if I can avoid that trajectory, if you look at the paintings that Paul Rand did late in his life, like awful versions of Paul Klee, but
yeah.
many others.
Yeah.
I think if I can avoid that and I think that design is like one of the wonderful things in design is that you can go into all these different directions. We did furniture, we did a film, we are now doing things that are not for clients, but you still can call it design.
Mm-hmm.
And if we go back quickly to that sculpture that we haven't even done yet, but hopefully will complete in the next weeks, it's a piece that ultimately talks about a very large thing, the world religions,
Mm-hmm.
and tries to make that thing communicatable in a hopefully pretty beautiful piece of sculpture. I mean, that's pretty much the definition of communication design.
Yeah.
A large thing, and you make it as a designer communicatable.
Yes.
You make it you make it understandable. And so, yeah. And at the same time, if somebody wants to call it art, please be my guest.
Just let them. Stefan, you're a delight to speak with. Thank you for taking your time with me, and I know that my audience will really appreciate this. And I've gotten until October to get to Guadalajara, huh?
Exactly. We actually do have a spare bedroom, so yeah.
Stefan Sagmeister, thank you for your time.
James Victory, it was a pleasure.
I love you, buddy.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Same here.
Adios.
Thanks a lot. Adios.
Bye-bye.